What's up everybody, it's Rock from Smoke Q. Today we're doing tomahawk steaks on the Traeger. These things are amazing, huge cut of meat, and so delicious. You gotta check this recipe out. For my money, tomahawk steaks are one of the more striking things to put on your smoker and serve to your favorite people. At the end of the day, it's a great cut of ribeye steak with a big bone handle. What is not to love? So, to get started, I use some olive oil as a binder on the top of this tomahawk steak, rubbing it in slightly before grabbing some of my anytime seasoning, which is essentially a salt, pepper, garlic, and adding a heavy dose of it. Next, I put on a slightly lighter dose of my coffee rub to give it that earthy umami flavor. Essentially, I'm using a 2-to-1 ratio of the SPG and coffee rub. As always, grab any of your favorite spices, but some others that you could use to get this same flavor profile would be Killer Hogs AP and Whiskey Bent's The Grind. So now with the topside seasoned, I flipped over to apply some more olive oil and then a heavy dose of my SPG before then coming over with a lighter dose again of that coffee rub. As you can see, I get these rubs put on both the front and the back, and I take my hand and very lightly pat it so that I can get the rubs that I just sprinkled on to adhere a little bit better to that olive oil binder. And then as a last step, I used all that overcast to make sure I get seasoning on all the edges of this great steak. For this cook, I'm actually doing 2 tomahawk steaks, and I'm beginning by smoking them at 250 degrees on my Traeger Timberline XL for close to 2 hours. This allows me to impart a ton of great smoke flavor into these huge cuts of meat. As these steaks smoke, I'm watching the temps and waiting for them to get to roughly 125 degrees internal temperature, and that's when I begin to heat up my cast iron skillet while adding a couple slabs of butter. As you'll see here, that cast iron skillet is smoking hot, and right when those steaks hit 130 degrees, that's when I move them from the smoker over to that screaming hot cast iron and get a solid sear on both sides. While they're searing, the internal temp is actually going to raise almost another 5 degrees. And that's really where I want to get these to finish at 135 degrees internal temperature. To make sure I get a really solid sear with that bone sticking out a little bit, I do use my hand to ensure that steak gets the whole surface, good contact with the cast iron. Now, I want to put just enough pressure to help sear, but not too much to squeeze juices out of the steak. After removing the steak from the cast iron, I let it rest, and while I do, I put on a slight sliver of salted butter and then grab some finishing salt to sprinkle it on top. Both of these will melt into the steak as it rests for roughly 5 to 10 minutes. This allows all those juices to redistribute and make a delicious first bite after resting and slicing. Now speaking of slicing, I'm ready to cut into this delicious ribeye, so I first start by removing that long tomahawk bone from the ribeye and spinning it around to go ahead and slice the whole steak into long strips against the grain. I like slicing like this to eventually serve slices to my hungry family. Now at the end of the day, these tomahawk steaks are a great cut of steak because it's really just a ribeye with that bone handle attached. But honestly, I'm of the impression that doing this often really is just wasting a lot of money buying that bone weight when you buy the meat. But every once in a while, you gotta have some fun, and this is just something that really turned out great. I got it into the perfect medium internal temperature, and that's where that delicious first bite was amazingly tender and juicy. Paired with that umami flavor from the coffee rub, it was lights out, not to mention how cool the kids thought that bone handle was. Thanks for watching this latest video recipe, and if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button to stay up to date on all the latest recipes.